presented by YTV shows with me, your host, Swechhya Sangraula, in this journey where we create a platform to think and talk about foreign policy in Nepal from a holistic perspective. Foreign policy is that show where we as individuals can create a voice and cause an impact on the decisions that affect us and the world. On today's episode, we discuss the Russian annexation of Crimea. It all started with the allegedly pro-Russian president of Ukraine, Mr. Viktor Yanukovych's rejection to agreement with European Union that led to large-scale protests and the fleeing of Mr. Yanukovych from the city of Kiev on 22nd February 2014. The fate of Crimea was then determined by a referendum on March 16th, where reportedly 97% of the total voters decided in favor of joining Russia, leading up to its annexation, which today has been termed by many as illegal and against international law. For today's episode, we have as our guest Mr. Trailokya Aryal, an international relations enthusiast, op-ed contributor to the Kathmandu Post, who has written extensively in national dailies on the issue of foreign politics, policy, and latest on the lessons from Ukraine. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
On a recent article where you've written about lessons from Ukraine and the whole episode of Russia, Crimea, you say that it cannot be taken lightly. Why is it that you say that?
Well, in Nepal, or like in any other country, you cannot take this episode very lightly because, there are two ways to look at international relations. One is the Lockean idealism that says liberal institutions will prevail, people are essentially nice and they don't go to war, and the nations generally do not harbor expansionist tendencies. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Hobbesian realists. They say it's a dog-eating-dog world of world politics, mm-hmm. where everybody should be on their guard. And the recent episode has, the Ukrainian episode is a lesson, should be an eye-opener to everyone, every country in the world, including Nepal, like a small country that is between two huge neighbors, that if we are not on our guard, mm-hmm. if our neighbors or if any other superpower feels its interest threatened in Nepal, then it will go to any extent, mm-hmm. to compromise our sovereignty.
You mentioned a very interesting aspect of how people have always considered the idea of state sovereignty. And a lot of people have been saying, including the United Nations, that this mm-hmm. is an attack on the sovereignty of mm-hmm. Ukraine, mm-hmm. and the de facto annexation mm-hmm. cannot be taken as legal in any sense. Mm-hmm. But when we see that, we also see that nothing has really prevented Russia from annexing mm-hmm. Crimea. Mm-hmm. So do you think there is some sort of a paradox going on in the world right now where a lot of people are talking about its illegality, mm-hmm. but still not being able to prevent it?
Well, yeah, definitely. Like I said, we have two ways to look at international politics. One is Lockean idealism, mm-hmm. saying okay, people are good, and if you have liberal institutions, international institutions, organizations, international law, UN, this and that, mm-hmm. they will help prevent such scenarios. Then again, like I said, we have Hobbesian or Machiavellian realism that says, no, mm-hmm. anything can happen, and these international institutions, they can only suggest, they cannot prevent. Mm-hmm. For example, many countries have been annexed, many countries are fighting civil wars, and countries go to war with each other. So international organizations cannot really do anything. It's just they, in a way, they preach from this high pulpit saying okay, don't do this, don't do that.
Only
but nothing, that will create an impact. So mm-hmm. again, I say for diplomacy between two countries, mm-hmm. bilateral diplomacy is what can prevent mm-hmm. things like this, not UN or international law or any other organization.
You mentioned this perspective about how Nepali politicians, after they mm-hmm. they're taken into office, mm-hmm. immediately after that appointment, they are seen doing what we call the neighbor run,
yes.
either going to India or to China.
Yeah.
Don't you think this is an idea that they're trying to enhance bilateral relations? Why do you see that as a possible threat against Nepalese sovereignty?
Well, if I am not mistaken, what I have written is before the form a government, they make all these Beijing and Delhi runs, mm-hmm. so that they think, these countries will support them to lead a government, to form a government in Nepal. And that is quite bad, because in today's world, if you rely on your neighbor's support to form a government, to form a government, lead a government in a country like Nepal, then the neighbors expect you, and of course you also feel an obligation to work for their interests, not for Nepal's interests.
Yes.
So, that's why, I say like this is bad. They have to trust the people's verdict, and not look for steady ways to form governments.
And there's only so much that they can do, that they can enhance good relations, but they can't take it to a level where their entire appointment is dependent on the good wishes of that particular country, right?
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, you cannot say you are democratic, you believe in like people, but at the same time you look for support to form a government, lead a government in New Delhi or Beijing, or Washington DC for that matter.
So how are we to draw that line between a good bilateral relation between neighbors and that thin line that goes towards being a puppet state? How do you draw that line exactly?
Well, it's very difficult, and that's where diplomacy and patriotism comes in. If diplomacy does not contain like element of patriotism, then that's again it's a failure. That's you are only working for your personal interest. So the leaders have to really think, like, okay, our neighbors want this, we want this. They want us to go all the way. We cannot go all the way. We can go up to here. And you draw a fine line saying, okay, you want this, we can give you this. Let's work together. That's, good diplomacy. There you preserve your national, like sovereignty and national independence in a way that you can make your own decisions. You are not dependent on others' decisions. So, how can you do that is like, element of patriotism, put nation first, and, believe in democracy. So like, people have, people have given the verdict that I better stay in opposition, then you stay in the opposition. So that's how you can do it.
Bringing it back to the whole Crimea issue, it has been allegedly said that Mr. Yanukovych was a Russian puppet. People have gone as far as to say that. But recently he has been seen saying that the Russian annexation of Crimea was a tragedy, and that he would request Mr. Vladimir Putin to give it back. Well, while there are people saying that he's pro-Russian, people sort of had an expectation of him giving a consent of the annexation of Crimea, but then he completely turned into something else. And how do you draw that analogy of Mr. Yanukovych being a puppet of Russia, as said by a lot of people, to the political leaders who you think might have been crossing that line slowly of good bilateral relations to help them in their appointment?
Well, this is a very interesting, thing, because Mr. Yanukovych was of course supported by the Russians, and well, we can call him a puppet, but of course, like he was supported by the Russians, and he worked for the for the Russian interests in Ukraine. But then, his recent U-turn on saying like on Crimean issue, I interpret it as like he learned the lesson hard way, like how like much dependency leads to undesired or untoward outcome. So of course, like he sought Russian support for his short-term benefit, short-term gain, or maybe like personal gains. But then when his country like was sort of like carved out, then probably like his patriotism came back and said like, okay, harm has been done. So I guess he learned his lesson the very hard way, and that's where we can learn a lot from his lesson as well.
So you think what he did is not indicative of a good diplomacy between Russia, that he could not fulfill that aspect of him as a diplomat, and he crossed that line definitely and learned the lesson hard way.
Exactly. That's because he failed to create that like space, personal space between him or like between Ukraine and Russia.
Mr. Aryal, there's another question that I'd like to ask you, that a lot of people saying that what happened in Crimea could happen to Nepal. Don't you think that it's a far-fetched idea, since the conditions between two countries are so different? Do you see any inkling of possibility of that happening in Nepal in any time?
Well, now let's begin with like our history. Today's Nepal, one interesting aspect about today's Nepal is we have been interpreting, reinterpreting and misinterpreting history. And we somehow tend to say that, the system comes first and the country comes second. Whereas, like in many functioning parts of the world, we put the country first and then the system. So, why I'm telling you this is, before, like until 1960s, you had the Nepalese Tarai totally cut off, only like huge jungles, and the native people like living there. Then it was King Mahendra's policy to send like the hilly people, the people from the hills, to migrate to the Tarai region. So today, look at the Tarai region. People are calling for their own ethnic state, right?
Yeah,
they want like the ethnicity-based like federal states.
Yeah, they call it self-determination.
Yes,
but they have
yeah. And then imagine today's like global interconnected world. We're talking about like this like narrow. We're taking this like ethnocentric or ethnic nationalism. We're talking about this. Imagine if in the 1960s, if we hadn't sent like people from the hill, if we didn't encourage them to go there, and if they were like only one minority group living in those places, of course, Crimea would have happened in Nepal like 60 years ago. And even today, because you see like the ethnic movements, ethnic nationalist movements, they pose a real threat to the Crimea-like disaster in Nepal. And it's just very possible.
I would like to link this with what India said regarding Russian annexation. It seems clear that it's not against the Russian annexation of Crimea. Do you see that as a threat in any sense? Is that some sort of a hint that India's foreign policy that is in line with Russian foreign policy on this particular issue, could that be a threat in any sense? Do you see that possibility of interpreting it that way? Well,
threat is always there, whether from India or China or from like any other country. If they think their interests are compromised, they will do, they will go all with the way to like do whatever they have to do to preserve their interest. So every country is threatened, like Mexico is threatened with America, and Americans are threatened with Mexico. So similarly, like, we should not interpret the Indian support of like Russia's annexation of Crimea as a threat to us. But what we should learn from it is every country, no matter where it is, faces that threat. And we are no exception. So that means we always have to be on our guard. It can be India, China, America, Australia, whoever. So we have to be on our guard. And we have to be able to, avert a situation like this by somehow addressing the concerns, valid concerns and interests of both of our neighbors or others who have their interests at stake in Nepal.
It's interesting that you say it like this, because I myself being a student, I hear in a number of occasions where people saying, okay, India has supported Russia in this sense, so this is a direct threat to Nepal, and how you said that it's a threat that it's not related with India supporting Russia, which is, I think, a very important point to be made to our audience and entire Nepal, who might be doubting India or China in some way.
No, there's no reason to doubt India and China. I mean, so far they have been good neighbors. But the problem is, have our leaders been able to address their concerns? And because of it, because our leaders, our system has failed to address their concerns, security concerns vis-a-vis India and China. India wants a lot of its interests, valid concerns addressed. China also has some of its valid interests in Nepal. So have we been able to address that? So if, and they being a functioning country, they have to do everything. Because for them, the country comes first. Your country comes first. Neighbors, they are secondary. It's good to have good neighborly relations, but when it, poses a threat, serious threat to your own existence, then you have to do whatever you have to do. So of course, like if India and China, feel their interests are being compromised, they will do that. So, like I've said, again and again, that if we can be mature, if we can address their concerns, and at the same time, leaders not being dependent on the Indian and Chinese government for personal or political gain, then things will be smooth between neighbors. Otherwise, it's a disaster.
So what do you see as a solution to the current crisis? You've mentioned in your article a number of times the importance of strong democratic and the process of democratization.
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean when you say the process of democratization is a solution to the crisis?
Oh, the process of democratization means, like I said earlier, leaders not only talking about democracy, but democratizing themselves from within. So, and that means not looking for shady ways to form governments. In Nepal, you see, there's somebody's appointed prime minister, and the very next hour, somebody is off to Beijing or to New Delhi, right? So you cannot say you're democratic and just count on other countries' support. Count on other countries' support to head the government. So real democratization means leaders accepting the people's verdict, saying, okay, they don't want me to, they don't want me as the prime minister this time around. So hopefully, I'll do good. I'll work for the public. I'll work for the people, and hopefully next time, my party will win enough votes so that I'll become the prime minister. So they have to think along this line, not say okay, I don't want this person. I have to be prime minister at any cost. So that's what I mean by real democratization.
We've come to the end of the program. Yeah. I'd like to end by asking you a question. This is a hypothetical question. If ever Nepal or any part of Nepal faces a similar problem, would it be fair, in your opinion, to say that it happened because our diplomacy failed in some way?
Absolutely, definitely. Because no country in today's world, at least our neighbors. One is one of the world's. Our neighbor to the south is the world's largest democracy. Neighbor to the north is focusing on economic development, and its international prestige. So I don't think they have designs evil designs on us. They will have to take such drastic step if we fail to somehow address their concerns. So if we can address their concerns, no, I don't think they will do anything to harm us, because both are friendly country to us, and both we need their support, both of their support for our development.
Yeah, that's a very positive note to end with. Thank you for coming to our program. We've indeed learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
What started in 1954 with the handing over of Crimea to Ukraine by Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to gain support following Stalin's death has today raised a very important question on the recognition of Russian annexation of Crimea. The Crimean episode has reinvigorated an old tussle between the right of self-determination and state sovereignty. Amidst the warring opinions in the matter, it is, however, true that strong diplomacy and constructive foreign policy and not aggression can be a solution to the problem. Thank you so much for watching us. We will reunite with you next Saturday, 7:30 in the morning. Until then, have a great week. Namaste.
नमस्कार, म हुँ जयकान्त राउत। मैले 2067 सालमा जापानको चिबा विश्वविद्यालयबाट च्याउ विज्ञानमा पीएचडी गरी हाल मुलुकमा च्याउको समग्र विकास र विस्तारको लागि क्रियाशील रहेको छु। र यसै क्रममा हामीले यो अनलाइन कोर्सको विकास गरेका छौँ र यो कोर्सले च्याउमा अभिरुचि राख्ने जो कोहीलाई पनि आधारभूत ज्ञान र सिप प्रदान गर्नुको साथै एउटा सबल र सफल च्याउ व्यवसाय बन्न अभिप्रेरित गर्नेछ भन्ने हामीले आशा राखेका छौँ। यस कोर्समा प्रस्तुत गरिने विषयवस्तुहरू यस प्रकार रहेका छन्। च्याउको सामान्य परिचय, च्याउको महत्त्व, विषालु च्याउ, च्याउ खेती प्रविधि, स्पनको सामान्य परिचय, कन्या च्याउको खेती प्रविधि, कन्या च्याउ उत्पादनको आर्थिक विश्लेषण, च्याउमा लाग्ने विभिन्न रोग तथा किराको व्यवस्थापन र च्याउ उत्पादन उपरान्तका प्रविधि।
सजिलोसिप.org मा यहाँहरू सबैलाई स्वागत छ। नेपालबाट अहिले रोजगारीको खोजीमा विदेशिनीको सङ्ख्यालाई हेर्ने हो भने दैनिक करिब 1200 देखि 1300 छ र नेपालमै अल्प रोजगार र बेरोजगारको तथ्याङ्कलाई केलाउँदाखेरि 46% भन्दा बेसी देखिन्छ। यो सबै समस्याहरूको पछाडि हेर्ने हो भने एउटा प्रमुख समस्याको रूपमा देखिन्छ यी व्यक्तिहरूमा सिपको कमी र त्यो सिप चाहिँ उहाँहरूलाई कसरी प्रदान गर्ने भन्ने हामी नेपालमा भएका युवाहरूको एउटा मुख्य समस्याका रूपमा रहेको छ र यही समस्यालाई समाधान गर्नका लागि एउटा सानो प्रयासका रूपमा हामीले सजिलोसिप.org भन्ने प्लेटफर्मलाई चाहिँ अगाडि ल्याएका छौँ। यस प्लेटफर्मले विभिन्न सिपमूलक तालिमहरू युवाहरूका लागि प्रदान गर्नेछ, जसका माध्यमबाट युवाहरू जसलाई चाहिँ सिपको खाँचो छ उहाँहरूले चाहिँ विभिन्न सिपहरू सिक्न सक्नुहुनेछ। जस्तो उदाहरणका लागि हामीले चाँडै नै सुरु गर्न गइरहेको आधारभूत च्याउ खेती, त्यस्तै गरी माइक्रोसफ्ट अफिस प्याकेजका विभिन्न प्रोडक्टहरू जस्तै माइक्रोसफ्ट वर्ड, एक्सेल, पावर पोइन्ट कसरी चलाउने भन्ने कुराहरू, यस्ता कुराहरू चाहिँ हामीले यस प्लेटफर्म मार्फत प्रदान गर्न खोजिरहेका छौँ। यो प्लेटफर्म चलाउन एकदमै सजिलो छ। साइन अप गर्ने, कोर्स खोज्ने, मन लागेको कोर्स छान्ने अनि पढ्न सुरु गर्ने। सजिलो सिप चलाउन निकै सजिलो छ। यो तपाईँले आफूलाई मन लागेको डिभाइसमा चलाउन सक्नुहुन्छ, चाहे त्यो कम्प्युटर होस्, चाहे त्यो ट्याब्लेट होस् या मोबाइल नै होस्। यस प्लेटफर्मबाट प्रदान गरिने तालिमहरू नेपाली भाषामा हुनेछन्, जसले गर्दाखेरि हामीले बुझ्न र सिक्न अझै सजिलो हुनेछ भन्ने हामीले विश्वास लिएका छौँ। सजिलो सिप मार्फत आधारभूत च्याउ खेतीका उत्कृष्ट 5 सहभागीलाई तालिम पश्चात आफ्नै च्याउ खेती सञ्चालन गर्नका लागि रु 10,000 प्रति व्यक्तिका दरले उपलब्ध समेत गराइनेछ। आउनुहोस्, सिक्ने अनि सिकाउने यो नयाँ माध्यममा हामी सँगै अगाडि बढौँ।
गतिसँग होइन, सुरक्षासँग प्रतिस्पर्धा गरौँ। बाटो काट्दा जेब्रा क्रसिङको प्रयोग गरौँ। गाडी चालकहरूले पैदल यात्रीलाई प्राथमिकता दिउँ। रातो बत्ती बलेको बेला बाटो काट्ने गरौँ। जथाभावी बाटो काटेर दुर्घटनाको समाचार नबनाऊ। आकाशे पुल प्रयोग गरी सभ्य नागरिकको परिचय दिउँ। दमकल एम्बुलेन्सलाई प्राथमिकता दिउँ। पैदल यात्रीले फुटपाथको प्रयोग गरौँ। ट्राफिक चिन्हको जानकारी हासिल गरौँ। गाडीमा झुन्डिएर यात्रा नगरौँ। अरूलाई बाधा पुग्ने गरी सवारी पार्क नगरौँ। मादक पदार्थ सेवन गरी सवारी नचलाऊ। सवारी चलाउँदा मोबाइलको प्रयोग नगरौँ। सवारी चलाउँदा अनिवार्य सिट बेल्टको प्रयोग गरौँ। साइरनवाला गाडीलाई प्राथमिकता दिउँ। ट्राफिक नियम पालना गरौँ।
स्टुडियो, एडिटिङ, टेलिभिजन कार्यक्रम निर्माण, डकुमेन्ट्री, प्रोफाइल वा विज्ञापन प्रसारण सामग्री निर्माण गर्नु परेमा हामीलाई सम्झनुहोस्। युथ ब्रोडकास्टिङ सर्भिस, बुद्धनगर, काठमाडौँ। मोबाइल नम्बर 9840 21 34 38, 98510 82 240 र 98510 72 057।